Record. Dear students, welcome to RATS, Racing Against Time for Students in Pathology. We shall be continuing with our classes in hematology. This is a case study. A 33-year-old female with a history of hypothyroidism on treatment presented to the physician with complaints of dyspnea and stock and glove sensation. What is your diagnosis? You can very well appreciate the pallor in the patient. Further investigation showed an increase in the antimicrosomal antibodies of the thyroid. There was also a mild increase in the serum bilirubin. The patient exhibited a beefy tongue. Discuss the etiopathogenesis, blood picture, bone marrow picture of this patient. Whenever you are given a question, it would be pertinent of you to make highlights of the important keywords, and that shall lead us to the diagnosis. In this case, they are all encircled over here. I hope you can put them together and then come to a diagnosis. The patient also showed a peripheral blood with macroovulocytes. The cells were large and oval in outline. Some of them showed some inclusions such as Howell-Jolly bodies. A few fragmented RBCs were also present. The diagnosis is pernicious anemia. And the class shall be on the first part of megaloblastic anemia, the importance of which is given in the enclosure. Thomas Addison was the first person to describe the pernicious anemia, and hence it is called an Addisonian pernicious anemia. And Biermer, a student of Rudolf Virchow in Zurich, described progressive pernicious anemia in 1872. And this is a gentleman. And both of them have contributed to a great disease as such, because the word megaloblastic itself means fatal. This can be the other proper names for it. Sometimes we can get this on our question papers. Do not be bewildered. And amazing. Look at the age and the attention and the relaxation of this particular gentleman, William B. Castle, an American physician who was a pioneer in clinical hematology. He was a physician himself, and he identified a factor called intrinsic factor. So that is the historical background of this disease. Before we go and learn the abnormal, let us see the normal first. These are the series of cells which ultimately lead to the normocytic normochromic RBC. So you have got a pronormoblast, basophilic, polychromatic normoblast, orthochromatic, orangish. Then polychromatic cell, there is no nucleus in this. Finally, we get a completely hemoglobinized RBC. The counterpart of these are seen in megaloblastic anemia. You find that the nucleus is large. It has got an open chromatin, and this is called a promegaloblast, and each of these are counterparts of the same. And even as the cytoplasm continues to mature, I find that there is no difference in the tinge of the cytoplasm. Ultimately, it is all the same, but the nuclear maturation lags behind the cytoplasmic maturation. So this is called a basophilic megaloblast, polychromatic megaloblast, orthochromatic, and then finally a polychromatic macrocyte and macroovalo RBC. This again, I would like you people to repeatedly reinforce it. I am finding the various stages of the normoblast. Here I find the pronormoblast, then there is a basophilic normoblast, then it becomes polychromatic, orthochromatic, then the RBC, reticulocyte and the RBC. So this particular lineage, I would like you people to be thorough with because this shall form the fulcrum of our class. And just do compare this one. So there is a large cell, abnormally large cell, and there is a delay in the clear maturation when compared to the cytoplasmic maturation. Compare this with this. I hope it is clear for you people. This is a very, very important cycle that we should memorize. I shall try my best to teach this to you people. You find that there is a combination of folic acid cycle as well as part of the metabolism of vitamin B12. So there is a methyl tetrahydrofolic acid which is converted to tetrahydrofluoric acid. And during this process, you find there is a metabolism. Methionine is converted to, or rather homocysteine is converted to methionine by means of vitamin B12. If the patient is going to be having a deficiency of B12, then the homocysteine is not converted to methionine. This particular step does not progress. The patient will be presenting with homocystinuria. Well, that is a different story. But the point is, when this doesn't happen, then there is no conversion of the methyl tetrahydrofolic acid to tetrahydrofolic acid. And this is called the folate trap. Once it is converted, you find that there are the various steps. This is converted to methylene tetrahydrofolic acid, dihydrofolate, and then by means of the reductase, again to tetrahydrofolic acid, it goes on. But this particular one, it is just like a cog of wheels. One wheel rotates and then it moves the other. Here is a maturation of the DNA. There is a deoxyuridylate, deoxyuridine, deoxyuridylate, then deoxythymidylate, and then DNA thymidine. Finally, the DNA is formed from this. So when there is going to be a defect in the folic acid metabolism, there is no maturation of the DNA. That is why we are getting a nuclear lag in the maturation. This particular cycle, I would like you people to kindly memorize. Very simple, folic acid metabolism and B12 metabolism are intertwined. There is a step called where homocysteine is converted to methionine by means of B12. This particular step is essential for methyl tetrahydrofluoric acid to get converted to tetrahydrofolic acid. And once it is done, there is a methylene tetrahydrofolic acid, dihydrofolate, and it goes on. And this helps in the maturation of the DNA. Deoxyuridine, deoxyuridylate, deoxythymidylate, and DNA thymine. So this is important for you people. Please do this in the pathogenesis of megaloblastic anemia. It is mandatory. This we had seen earlier. I hope you appreciate it. This is an important diagram in the metabolism of B12. B12 absorption is what we see over here. There is a vitamin B12. It is abundant in our diet as such. And then there is initially a binder from the salivary fluid called the R binder. The R binder gets bound to the B12 and it goes down. So you find this R binder, it goes down, and finally in the stomach, there are some cells called the parietal cells which will be secreting the intrinsic factor. So there is an intrinsic factor which is being secreted. So once there is an intrinsic factor, you find that the R gets released and the intrinsic factor, it gets bound to the intrinsic factor. Here it gets bound to the B12. So it is called the intrinsic factor on the B12 complex, during which process you find that the R binder is released. After this complex is formed, the intrinsic factor B12 is formed. It gets attached to a receptor in the ileal cell. There is an ileal receptor which attaches the B12 and the intrinsic factor complex. Once it is attached, it is absorbed, the intrinsic factor is released, and the B12 is absorbed into the blood. This is the cycle. So Dietary B12 gets bound to the R binder. The R binder goes to the stomach, and you find the B12 R binder is broken. The R binder is released and the B12 gets attached to the intrinsic factor produced by the parietal cells. It forms the intrinsic factor B12 complex, which goes down the ileum and gets attached to the ileal receptor, gets absorbed, the intrinsic factor is released. So why are we saying this again and again? So this is again a very simplistic diagram. I would like you people to kindly write this. Vitamin B12, and you find that there is initially the R binder, and once it is getting absorbed, it gets bound to the intrinsic factor. And then there will be the receptor for the intrinsic factor in these. And finally, it is getting absorbed by the intestinal epithelial cells. It enters the portal circulation and goes to various organs such as the liver or the bone marrow where it is stored. So this will be the normal absorption. And why are we saying this again and again? You must draw this one. It is mandatory, compulsory, without which you will not get marks. Basically, this class is meant on pernicious anemia, and I had been telling you people about the antithyroid antibodies, etc., which all means that this is an autosomal kind of disease, which means there will be antibodies against the body's own cells. So what are the antibodies that you can see? So there's a pair of immunoglobulins over here, which will be producing the antibodies. So here you find that there are the parietal cells. The parietal cells will be producing the intrinsic factor. Sometimes there can be antibodies against the intrinsic factor, which can lead to pernicious anemia. Patient will not be having the intrinsic factor at all, so he develops a pernicious anemia. This is step one. And this we had seen earlier. So I repeat it again, you find that there is absorption, B12 gets bound to haptocorrin and it travels into the intestine, the pancreatic enzyme is over there, the B12 is released, gets attached to the intrinsic factor. There are receptors in the ileum which attach the B12 intrinsic factor. The intrinsic factor is released, B12 gets absorbed, it goes into the portal circulation into the liver. Now, what are the various antibodies which can be present in a case of pernicious anemia? One, that can be an anti-parietal cell antibody. The parietal cells themselves are destroyed. Or two, there can be an intrinsic factor antibody. The intrinsic factor is again being produced by the parietal cell. There can be antibodies to this. Third one will be a binding antibody, which prevents the binding of the B12 and the intrinsic factor. Finally, a blocking antibody, which prevents the blockage of the substance to the receptor. So there are 4 different kinds of antibodies. I would like you people to kindly memorize. So there's the intrinsic factor and the B12. The intrinsic factor is over here and it gets blocked. It cannot be bound. Or sometimes you find that there can be a binding antibody which prevents the binding of the B12. So these are important for you people. Binding antibody, blocking antibody, anti-parietal cell antibody, anti-intrinsic cell antibody. So look at this one, these are again be repeated. So pernicious anemia, you find that there will be a decrease in the parietal cells, decrease in the intrinsic factor, and therefore the intrinsic factor B12 will be affected. There is a defect in the complex and there won't be any absorption because of the antibodies which are present in this. So these are the things that you people should remember. Binding antibody, blocking antibody, it's a question. Now we shall go back to picture 1. In this one, I am finding that there is somewhat a normal kind of an erythropoiesis, but here you find that the cells are slightly larger, they lag back in the nuclear maturation. Look at this nucleus in this one. Here it is getting condensed, whereas here it is not so very condensed. And finally, you find that there is a polychromatic and a larger cell. A macrocyte is seen in the peripheral blood, whereas these are all normocytes that we see. I hope you people are able to appreciate the difference, at least in the last 2 pictures. You are able to see. So this will be mandatory for us to explain. What are the organ changes in a case of megaloblastic anemia? That too in pernicious anemia. In pernicious anemia, the patient can be having an atrophic glossitis, bald, beefy tongue, red tongue. There is a chronic atrophic gastritis with intestinal metaplasia. I shall be showing you a picture of it. There will be chronic atrophic gastritis. Maybe because of this, the parietal cells are not there, intrinsic factors not there, and there can be a change called intestinal metaplasia. There can be the absence of the chief for the parietal cells. There is also what is called a subacute combined degeneration of the spinal cord. So here I find that there is a degeneration of the spinal cord, the pale areas that we see. It is because of this only you find that the sensory nerves are getting affected and the patient develops what is called a Stockton glove sensation. Typical one. In Tamil, they used to say as kai kal kodachal. And the patient has got that kind of a symptom. Mild jaundice is there because of the cellular destruction. So there is a very mild hemolytic jaundice. And therefore, there can be hemosiderin pigment in other organs. So these are all the other organ changes which you people should mention. The glossitis, the gastritis, the absence of the parietal cells, subacute combined degeneration of the spinal cord, minimal jaundice, and hemosiderin deposition. Look at this picture over here. Normally, this is called the mucosa. The mucosa is reduced to almost 1/3 of its thickness. And there are a lot of small dark cells. They are all the lymphocytes, indicating that there is a gastritis. There is an atrophy, there is an inflammation. Therefore, it is called atrophic gastritis. And here you see it is autoimmune. The dictum is whenever you see a congenital anomaly in a patient, you are supposed to look for congenital anomalies elsewhere in the body. For example, there can be what is called a syndactyly. The patient is not able to separate the digits. But later on, you find that there can be a thyroiditis also in the same patient. So there is a reduction in the intrinsic factor and there is a failure of absorption of B12 deficiency. Patient can manifest with a megaloblastic anemia, glossitis, and a peripheral neuropathy. Look at this particular one. This is called the Schilling's test. In this one, there is a star that is attached to B12, indicating that it is a radiolabeled B12. A radiolabeled B12 is given orally. And it combines with the intrinsic factor, it is getting absorbed. That is the usual physiology. But what is the difference between a patient with a pernicious anemia and a normal patient? Simultaneously, you find a large bolus of B12 is given parentally, and you find nearly 1,000 micrograms of B12 will be given. And what happens is, if the patient is going to be normal, more than 7% of it will be excreted because there is already enough of B12 in the blood, and therefore more will not be absorbed. But in the case of severe pernicious anemia, the patient has got a deficiency of B12, and in spite of giving a large bolus, you find more of it is getting absorbed. And in the case of pernicious anemia, less than 7% is excreted. Repeat. What we see on the screen is a Schilling's test. Schilling's test is almost outdated now. It is not being practiced. But at the same time, it is of importance in the examination. Therefore, we shall see what it is. This is a radiolabeled B12 which is given orally to the patient. And it combines with the intrinsic factor, it gets absorbed. Simultaneously, a large bolus of B12 is given parentally, and this also gets absorbed into the blood. Now, what happens is the patient happens to be normal, more than 7% of the radiolabeled B12 will be excreted, whereas in the case of pernicious anemia, he is already having a deficit. Therefore, almost everything is getting absorbed, less than 7% is excreted. This is the basic principle of the Schilling's test. Now, since he is having a defect in the intrinsic factor, the test is repeated after giving the intrinsic factor. If the excretion is going to be normal, then it shows that the defect is basically the deficiency of intrinsic factor. That means you have diagnosed pernicious anemia. In some patients, what will happen is it can be due to a syndrome called malabsorption syndrome. Whatever we take is not absorbed. And this can be due to infections also. In such a case, patient is treated with tetracycline and the test is again repeated. By this, we can rule out or confirm malabsorption. So these are the steps in Schilling's test. I hope you people will be able to write it. And it is a summary. It measures the absorption and the urinary excretion of radioactively labeled B12. It is outdated and cumbersome. Before I end this first session, I would like you to note down the causes for B12 deficiency. It can be because of a decreased intake, inadequate diet, impaired absorption. There can be gastric causes such as a defect in the intrinsic factor, pernicious anemia. Some patients undergo a gastrectomy. Therefore, there can again be a defect in the intrinsic factor. Intestinal causes which are causing malabsorption. That itself is a huge list. Similarly, any ileal resection. Parasitic infestation, Diphyllobothrium latum or a fish tapeworm is a classical example. Increased requirement in a case of pregnancy and cancer. And in some cases, there can be metabolic inhibitors which make the patient non-responsive to treatment. So these are all the causes for B12 deficiency, which should by hearted for the time being. And there can also be a defect in folic acid deficiency. I would like you people to kindly make use of this mnemonic. You find that I for inadequate diet, I for impaired absorption, I for increased loss, hemodialysis, I for increased requirement in the case of pregnancy, infancy, etc., impaired utilization, anticonvulsant drugs, and irresponsive or unresponsible to treatment, metabolic inhibitors. Folic acid is needed for all these things. Synthesis of the DNA and the normal maturation of the RBC, purine and pyrimidine. So this is a normal one. I would like you to kindly by heart this timetable use of the mnemonic 6Is. This is phenytoin sodium and anticonvulsant, which causes a defect in folic acid metabolism. Patient can land up with megaloblastic anemia. So the question that we omit is our university question. Au revoir. See you in part 2.